So before we start off with today's lecture formally, I want to ask you, what do you remember of our previous lecture? What did we discuss in the previous lecture?
Academic writing waterflow model
Waterfall model, yes.
and
So
academic writing.
academic writing. Okay. So the academic writing was previous one. In the most recent previous one, we discussed about waterfall model, and we discussed that waterfall model is basically a linear model in which all the specifications requirements have to be prior decided before you go on to design and implementation stage. Now, one thing I want all of you to think over as we are talking about software development life cycles is that because you are yourselves working on the project for the different cases that have been already given to you. So think of the software development life cycle that you will be deploying when you are working on the projects. So basically we will be discussing three software development life cycles. We have already discussed waterfall. Second, today we will discuss is the spiral model, and then going forward we will discuss agile methodology. So the idea is not just to know theoretically about the waterfall model and all the models that we will be discussing, but to actually see their applications while we are doing our respective projects. So that's the idea that we are trying to discuss these software models. Now, one question I want to ask you before we proceed with our lecture is, what were the shortcomings of the waterfall model that we had identified?
There was no feedback system.
Okay. What else?
Ma'am, we cannot revert back to previous processes.
Of course, we can revert back to the previous process, but the cost involved is too high.
And we can only use the product at the in the last stage after so much time.
Okay. Yeah, because of the systematic nature of in which the software is developed using the waterfall model, unless and until it has been fully formed, we don't know about the product unless and until it is tested at the last stage. Anyone else? Anything we are missing? Fixing early stage bugs. So what? Is it possible in waterfall model? It's not possible in waterfall model. Sanskar. But cost and time expensive. So is waterfall model like it persisted quite strongly in 1980s, 1990s. Uh, is it totally irrelevant in modern times? What do you think? There is absolutely no software that could be developed using waterfall model in current times.
Ma'am, there
Cost
could
rate.
be, but deadlines are much shorter in this new generation.
Uh,
Is it only about the deadlines?
Also, the software that needs to be robust can be used, and it can take too much time. So anything like bank software or something like that can be used through. I mean, built through waterfall model.
Okay. So basically, if you know what you are creating, simple softwares can be developed. So how do you characterize a simple software? What is a simple software? So when you talk about these terms like simple software complexity level, you have to go much more deeper beyond just these words. You have to really identify, obviously it depends from project to project and differs from software to software. However, when we talk about simplicity or complexity of the software, we definitely talk about what we desire from that software. and how the multiple elements interact, and how clearly do we know about the software before we set out to create it. So definitely, as the complexity of software increases, or the functionality of the system that we are trying to create is not so linear, there will be probability of fault occurrences, and waterfall may not be the right model because it doesn't have an element of risk assessment. So when we proceed from step to step in waterfall model, there is no such thing as risk assessment. So if I do not do this, or if I am at a particular stage in this software development life cycle, what are the risks associated with this particular step? And if I do not consider this risk into picture, what is it that I set out to lose or set out to gain? So definitely. And so, Garvit, number of features and lines of code are the manifestations of the complexity of the software. I mean, they not necessarily define the complexity of software, but they are the consequence of the fact that the software being developed is complex. So you really need to think about complexity of software in terms which are way beyond just lines of codes. Yeah, so if you know how a particular software behaves and it has been behaving all the period of time, and you just need to create an already existing software with not much changes, then waterfall model would be very much useful. What about operating systems? Do you think operating system is a software? So if you were to create a operating system, what do you think? How suitable waterfall model would be?
Not really much,
So why?
as a software would an operating system would take many steps of processes and many possibilities of interaction. So many mistakes could be there.
But all of us know that operating systems are designed to function in a particular manner and do certain set of tasks over the period of time. So essentially, do you think the function of operating system has not changed much over the period of time? So think about all these things, like if you were to create an operating system or even a compiler, because these are, things that have not changed much over the period of time. So basically, waterfall model, it's not that it's always bad or always not the permissible software development life cycle. When you know your end product really well, like the back of your hand, and because of so many times you may have worked on this particular software, so waterfall model can be used. So is my PPT visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So waterfall model works well when software requirements are well understood. Okay, so again, because of the structure of the waterfall model, you have to get the requirements really clear before you go on to the design stage and implementation stage. So let's say if you already know the requirements for a particular software and there is no room or very little room for any uncertainty or risks to come into picture while you are developing a software, then waterfall model may quite work well. So although it is debatable as we discussed, but sometimes when we are designing compilers or operating system, because we already know what the requirements are from the compilers and operating system, unless and until a lot is changing, generally waterfall model type approach is used. And when a software is particularly contract based, so then also, so for example, all of you are writing software requirements specifications, the SRS. So SRS was quite frequently used and prominent previously. It's not used much in these times, but having a knowledge of SRS is extremely important so that we can understand where we are coming from. So the idea behind creating SRS was to get the software requirements right. And once that document is there, the client and service provider have agreed what a software should do, then probably the development could have started. So if a software is document driven, or you have been given that these are the specifications that are needed, and if the provider is also 100% sure that the requirements or the features do not have to deviate much from the document, then you can use waterfall model. However, when you are designing interactive user applications, a waterfall model may not work well. So why do you think for interactive user applications, waterfall model may not be suitable? What's this? So what do you think would be the reason? How do I remove this? Because the main purpose is to understand users and give what they want. So what is it about understanding the users that makes waterfall model not so suitable? Why do you think when the application you are trying to make is user interactive, waterfall model could not be the most appropriate development life cycle? So also provide a bit of context when you are answering. One word hardly tells me what you are trying to say. Ayush, so what do you mean by feedback when it comes to user interaction?
Ma'am, what I mean by feedback is let's take an example of this Windows system. Every time they launch a new version, they first give it to the testers, and anyone can easily like become a tester. And when we use it, we have to give certain feedbacks, and they use that feedback, and accordingly they change features or improve it. So that is something which really makes it better.
Yeah. So in a software which has user interaction, so there is a continuous information giving and transmission happening. So that means the way a software behaves is not independent of the user's actions. So a user is giving some trigger, giving some feedback, and accordingly a software has to behave. So that is why in this case, a software is not just a standalone system which is vomiting some kind of information or spewing some kind of information. It is taking some information, receiving in and transmitting some output based on that information. And that is why when user interaction is, there in the software, that means it is basically working in collaboration, in participation, in cooperation with the user. And that is why it may not be always feasible to understand the requirements without getting the feedback from the user, be it verbally through interviews or through their interaction with the software. So again, whenever I ask a question about waterfall model, imagine the flow of waterfall model: requirements, specifications, design, implementation, and testing. And then imagine how this particular linear flow works or applies with the different software situations. For example, for user interactive applications. In the projects that you are working, you also need to ask these questions. When is waterfall model suitable for the type of products we are trying to make? Or is spiral model better, or is agile methodology better? So make sure, because in your final presentation, I will be asking a justification of what software development lifecycle you have used and why not. So be prepared with this critical thinking. All right. So as you have mostly pointed out, specifying the requirements for such applications is difficult since the interface design is highly subjective. So always when you are reading the theory in software engineering, try to link it with the real world using your common sense, because then understanding becomes really much more convenient. So let us try to reach to another software development lifecycle through a case study. So there's this Denver International Airport, I think it's in USA. So it had a baggage handling system. So initially the airport had intended that each individual airline should be responsible for its own baggage handling system. But then this American Airlines decided to use this particular airport as its second largest airport hub. So when American Airlines is quite a big organization, and when they decided to use DIA as its second largest airport hub, so they commissioned British Aerospace Automatic Systems to develop an efficient automated baggage handling system. So the moment the airlines, because the airlines wants to make the experience for customers right from taking off to taking their luggage from the baggage seamless, so they gave this responsibility of handling their baggage system to British Aerospace Systems. Why did they do this? Because DIA had this protocol that each individual airline should be responsible for their own baggage handling system. So British Aerospace accepted this request by American Airlines and the construction began. However, in the middle of this project, and this is a real life thing that has happened, in the middle of this project, somehow DIA officials sort of had a larger vision, sort of had an epiphany that maybe they could create an airport-wide efficient integrated baggage handling system. So rather than giving it to each airlines, maybe they could homogenize the process. So DIA presented this protocol to the British Aerospace, and but something was seriously wrong. That was not anticipated, but that was happening. So what do you think? In the middle of the software development, because baggage handling system is also automated, so definitely there's a software component involved. So what do you think would have been the troubles of the people who were involved in making this automated chain when they were told that you don't have to just make it for American Airlines, but also throughout the airport, so that it can be centralized and used by any airlines that is using that particular airport. So what do you think would have been the challenges associated with this sudden introduction of a new demand in a software procedure that was technically following a template based or a particular trajectory? And imagine that, definitely, it's a change of scale. Earlier they were doing it only for one airlines, and suddenly they were asked to do this for almost all the airlines that were using that particular airport. So, would you like to elaborate, Tarun? What do you mean by removes creativity? Are you there, Tarun? Flowing something may sometimes cause, although your point is not clear, but I'm trying to understand. So definitely it was an added pressure on the management because they had to change certain plans, they had to redesign everything that they had already designed for American Airlines. So basically, the flow that they had in their mind was disrupted when DIA suddenly comes with British Aerospace with this new demand. So definitely you can imagine the degree of disruption it caused. So the new plan had, however, underestimated the high complexity of the expanded system. The system was being asked to expand, which was very different from the way it had been envisioned when it was starting to work only for the American Airlines. And that is why the challenges it posed was quite high. So imagine like this, even in your software development lifecycle technically should be like this, that even if I were to change the case problems after 1 month and you are already working on the project, then ideally you should be able to accommodate the new demand with least amount of friction and problems, which somehow in this big project could not take place. So as the handling system was expected to expand to all the airlines, nobody actually thought at that time that what could be the risk involved with changing the system, let alone expanding the system. So if you really read this case study, you would see that because of this glitch and this short-sightedness in understanding how to go about the project, the airport actually had to shut down for quite some time, and the system had to be descaled, and sometime later airport was made open and operated successfully. So because of the shutdown of the airport, definitely they must have lost a lot of revenue and finance, and not to say even the reputation of the airport was at stake. So from this real life project, I want you to imagine the costs that can come up when we may not be good or active in assessing the risks associated with following a particular methodology in creating a software. How do you think this tragedy could have been avoided? What do you think? So if you were there during that time, how could you have avoided this tragedy that happened at DIA? Not tragedy, I mean something not really good. So how could you have avoided this that happened at DIA when the plan for expansion was proposed? So what would you have wanted to pre-plan? What sort of pre-planning would you have done? So, Sanidhya, you mentioned scalable approach. So, who would be the stakeholder who would be thinking of this scalability? The American Airlines, the British Aerospace, or the airport officials? British Aerospace. But the company was only doing what it was told to do. So why would it take any interest in whether they should expand or just do what they have been asked to do? The software company is only delivering the solution. So why do you think they should be worried about the scalability? So you're saying we should determine what scale is needed, but who is it that determines what scale is needed? Who tells that maybe there is something missing here and we may need to think? But the software company is only telling so software company is basically the service provider. So the service provider is doing what the client has asked. So why would you hold the collar of the software company? Okay, yeah, you're moving closer. So it could be a collaborative approach. Then again, see, let us think like this. When you are creating a software or any automated system, think of it at a large scale, being able to solve the problems which are similar to it or analogous to it, if not exactly similar. I mean, at this airport context, do you think it would have been sort of commonsensical to think that if a particular airline is asking to make a baggage handling system at the airport, but the airport officials have made it clear that every airline should have its own baggage handling system. So at that time, because of this was happening, they thought that since automation is happening, they can actually make it more homogenized. So that was a good suggestion that came from airport officials, but maybe the timing of the suggestion played a spoil sport in less than successful story of automated baggage handling system at the Denver airport. So these are, see, these are the problems which are manifestations of lack of long-term thinking, and obviously a lack of collaborative approach towards problem solving. So when you're trying to solve a particular problem, don't operate in silos, don't operate in, isolated universe of your own. Step out of your universe, definitely talk to your team members, but also, as we saw in the reframing of the problem, talk to the outsiders also, because that will definitely stop you from making much more costly mistakes as you proceed towards the software development. So at every step you have to be very critical, but keep common sense very close to yourselves whenever you are working on any project. Ultimately, that software has to be used by people. Who are the people who are using it? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the ultimate consumers of that software? When you start incorporating this kind of thinking in, whatever you are creating, definitely you end up having a better survival value of your software. So from these case studies, especially I always say that we learn a lot from failures rather than we learn from what actually worked better. So try to keep this case study in mind, and the other one also in which you are working for your assessments. So they have important lessons to hold for all of us. So with with that kind of context, we come to the spiral model. So in 1986, to address the inadequacy in waterfall model, all the limitations of waterfall model that we have discussed, again a new method was proposed. Another thing at this juncture I want to point out is criticism is very, very important for evolution of science. Unless and until our work is constructively criticized, it may not be improved. So even in your own work, you should always be active to look for what may be missing, what could have been done better. Because constructive criticism is the only thing that leads to improvement in the softwares we are making. Unless and until we have found out the limitation and gaps in the existing infrastructure or framework, there is almost negligible possibility that anyone would work hard to improve it. So one thing to always remember is that something was not right with waterfall models. Spiral model was brought into picture. Something was not good with waterfall and spiral model both. Agile technology came up. In the current context, agile technology is the most common software development lifecycle used in most of the companies globally, but it is far from perfect. Again, there will be some other, new developments in this. So this is how science grows. Science definitely grows through criticism. You must never be afraid of constructive criticism. So with that, so one thing that was different about spiral model was it proposed a risk-driven approach to the software process rather than document-driven or code-driven process. So basically, risks in software projects could be like project costs, change requirements, as we saw in the previous example, and people keep on, entering into the organizations, exiting out of the organization. So if one specific very important person is working on a software project and we happen to lose them, definitely the dent it leaves would be quite high. And how do we cope up with that person leaving? Obviously, there is a notice period and all that. Katie is there, but then again, we have to find out another person who would be able to do all these things. So, what are we doing here when we are discussing all this? We are expanding our mind and trying to imagine all the real life challenges that happen in software projects and development projects. And then again, some dependability on other hardware is there, and that is not coming up, so that could stall the progress of your software development. Then competition from other software developers is there, and maybe you are working on a software, but suddenly someone has developed or come up with other technology which has completely rendered the software obsolete. So these are some of the risks in software projects, and that is what spiral model aims to target, that it minimizes the risk by repeated use of prototypes. So unlike in the waterfall model, uh, you are not coming up with only one prototype after the end of this cycle. You may be developing multiple prototypes. Now, what do you feel could be the advantage and pros and cons of developing multiple prototypes of a software? So, definitely, it's not only about advantage. So, let us discuss at the moment that what do you think could be the pros and cons of developing multiple prototypes of the software, not necessarily the same in scale and degree, over the period of time as compared to one prototype after the end of the cycle. So, what do you think could be the advantage? Why did this particular scientist think of developing multiple prototypes over the duration of the final product development? Yeah, so it could consume more time and resources. Then again, in short term or in long term, others always have a long term vision. So, if in short term or in long term, it increases as volume of work increases. So, definitely the volume and demand increases because you know that you have to launch particular versions of the product. So that could definitely mean a lot more hard work. And what could be the advantage with this approach? It is better to know the consequences, Prasad says, of changes we are making. More prototypes give a better look into it. So more prototypes, I would say, provide us a deeper investigation of what you're trying to do. Not suitable for small projects, it may be expensive sometime. So anyone who wants to think about spiral model would be more feasible to, as Garvit points out, to, you know, projects which do not have much demand versus projects which may have multiple demands. So small level projects to medium level or medium scale projects. What do you think? Because again, creating a prototype is also not a cakewalk. And again, when you are trying to build a prototype on the top of the previous version, definitely they have to communicate to each other so that the dependencies are still intact. And when the second prototype is created, everything from the first prototype is actually not removed, but on the top of that, we try to create that software. So at this moment, do think about the advantages and the challenges. I wouldn't say disadvantages. I would say the challenges both in logistics and code associated with spiral model. So you were saying small scale projects do not necessarily need risk analysis. So what is it about small scale projects that they may not need risk analysis? What is so special about small scale projects? So when they are easily rewritable, or maybe because you know that things are not going to change a lot when you're trying to create small scale projects. So the risk or the uncertainty associated with small scale projects, I will not say it's negligible, but it's manageable and maybe less costly to handle if something were to go wrong. However, when we are talking about creating a project on a large scale, and how do we determine a small scale and large scale in software development? What do you think determines whether a software is a large scale project or a small scale project? And how do you estimate number of people using it here? The amount of labor and resources needed, target audience. So definitely, when you look at the stakes involved in a software project, of how much you are set out to lose if everything were to go wrong in your software project. And definitely it has to take into consideration the consumers also. But you see, even from consumers, we cannot say that a project is small level or big level, because when it comes to large consumers, it's basically about scalability. A software application may be quite small, very simple, but again, it could be used by large number of users. So their scalability is the issue. That it needs to be scalable. The system should be so robust that it does not crash depending on the number of people who are using it. So that may be very different from a large scale project. So for example, baggage handling system. Do you think, I mean, it was considered to be a big project, but at max, how many consumers will be there in the airport during that time to take off their luggage from the package belt, that conveyor belt? So think of terms of complexity of the system, the dependencies in the system, the different elements that are interacting in the system, the complexity of the requirements of the system. So, in fact, for your own projects, you must also discuss among your team members, do you consider it to be small scale, large scale? And if you're trying to create the projects, have this scalability thing in your mind, that tomorrow if you were to formally launch this software so that everybody could use it. So have that vision in mind and try to create a prototype, because when we aim for higher things, we gradually succeed in the things that lie below them, because we are thinking from that point of view. So working at a lower level comes very easily. So the thing with prototypes is, again, creating prototypes is not feasible for all the level of softwares, but if you are working on legacy codes or brownfield projects, it becomes much more easier. So with Spiral model, what happened was, with Spiral model, what in 1986 the person proposed was that you work on building progressively more complete versions of the software. So it's like, if it is has, so overall, if your software has around n features, you start out by creating features, number of features as a, where a is less than m, then add it to a plus b, a plus c, and then later on it goes to a plus or a plus till it equates to m. So this is called as a stepwise approach. If you have studied regression, even in regression there is something called a stepwise modeling, where you do not feed variables all at the same time, but one step at a time, so that you can see how a particular variable is interacting with a dependent variable. So similarly, in the software engineering, in the spiral model, this was that progressively build prototypes, and after each prototype has been created, you assess the risks associated with the current version. So whether it is good to move ahead in this after this prototype has been created. If not, then you go back about the process and then again try to start. So the problem that this model addressed was that risk assessment was done at each step of the cycle. Now, as we have discussed, these are the kind of risk in software projects. So after each prototype was created, technically the team would sit together and discuss that at this step, if we move forward, what are the dependencies? Do we have them? And what is the risk of moving forward with this particular prototype? If the risk is too high, then definitely in long term it would magnify. So a wiser decision would be to then go back, work on everything that you have done before creating the prototype, and then again create a prototype and stuff like this. So basically there are three anchor points in spiral model. So if your technical approach is well defined, enough to proceed, and the stakeholder conditions are met. So again, you ask this question. If the answer is an affirmative, then you go to the next stage of life cycle architecture. Then you check whether the optimal approach has been defined and all major risks are accounted for and planned for. So risks, as in you would know when you're working on a project that what is the risk, what do I set to lose if I develop a further prototype based on this prototype, what is it that it may fail at, what is it that it may not be able to do it, that what is it currently lacking that needs to be there for my second prototype to be there. So all these kind of risks and the costs associated with not considering this risk into picture has to be seen in spiral model. And then again, in the last initial operation capability, you need to check that adequate preparations have been made to satisfy stakeholders prior to launch. So basically, it means about software, users, and maintenance. You should notice that in this particular spiral model, the word stakeholder has come in. Stakeholder is basically people who are directly or indirectly related to the software you are making, who are affected by the quality of software you're making. And that is why communication with them and talking with them is extremely important. Because if you talk to them, you are not operating in a isolated universe. That channel of feedback, criticism is open. And I understand criticism is not always easy to take. I mean, I think it's a great skill to be humble in when the work is getting, constructive criticism. But in the long term, when you see the results of that, you definitely feel that it has helped in bettering of the solution that you're trying to create. So, risk assessment was something that was missing in the waterfall model, and hopefully, when you're working on your projects, you will be actively looking at the risk assessment. Why risk assessment is important is that the team sort of identifies a flexibility in approach. So when you are too rigid in your approach, what happens? I mean, and it's not specifically to software engineering, even in life. When we are quite rigid about certain things, and we have sort of that tunnel vision, and it is very difficult to anticipate what could go wrong, and if we have to then mend up things, it becomes very costly. So at every step, risk assessment is necessary, and we need to be aware and prepare for the challenges expected down the road of software development. So it's not going to be easy, it's going to be very hard, but we have to work on it, because not only we are trying to create something of value, but we are also trying to learn something way beyond programming and coding when we are working on actual software development. And that will definitely distinguish you from good engineers and great engineers. The ability to think that how a particular system is behaving. And unlike the airport officials at Denver, also always think about whenever you're creating a software that it were to be used by all the people in the world who would actually be benefited by the system. So how would your project or product behave then? When you have that sort of vision, it becomes easier to work on the details. Risk assessment in the long term, it mitigates the the failure rate of the software, the survival increases, and the potential for setbacks is also minimized. So contrast waterfall model with spiral model. Waterfall model did not talk about any prototype whatsoever. You pre-planned everything, you developed a full-fledged software. Basically, there is no talk about prototype at all in waterfall model. The only prototype is the final product. Whereas in the spiral model, you are developing a prototype which definitely is expanding over the period of time in its functionality. But every time a +1 version is there, you actually stop at the previous version, assess it, test it, function it, and identify the risk associated with moving forward with the project. So now, when you know the spiral model, how would have applied to the baggage automation system had you been the airport official and you knew what maybe the spiral model is? So what would have been your approach? What would you have told the British Aerospace, the software company that was making, if you had in the back of your mind something called as the spiral model? Is my question clear? Okay, so you would have checked for different possibilities and minimum viable product first. But what do you mean by different possibilities? Again, let us not operate in abstract world. Let us take this habit of being as precise as we can. Abstract things never help. So let us be more precise. Let us inculcate this habit that from today we will not talk in general or abstract terms. So what do you mean by different possibilities? What sort of different possibilities? So ideally, if you would be in charge of automating a particular baggage handling system at the airport, it would be very natural to ask that why only to do it for a particular airline? Why not for all the airlines that are using that airport? And what do we need to keep into mind or take into consideration when we are trying to scale up? So basically, they might have developed a prototype for American Airlines, but on the top of that prototype, they may have included all the other airlines as well. And that way, so the airport would have proceeded in the stepwise manner. So as Prasad mentions, making prototypes with increasing scales and test them to know what are the limitations and constraints we are going to face before starting directly with the intended scale. Absolutely, you directly hit it in the spot. That pause, even in software development, when you are developing, pause, discuss with your team members, then go forward. Then again, after some point of time, pause, discuss, and see the limitations and the risk associated. And then what happens with this approach is you are more confident when you are proceeding with developing your software. So at this stage, it is extremely vital to investigate even among your team members what kind of software development life cycle you think is feasible, suitable, reasonable for the project that you are doing. And you have already learned about 2 software models. So, for example, maybe you are planning to introduce new suite of features for your application, and we might discuss this in greater detail next time. But I just want to leave you with this thought that most of the time engineers feel that more features may mean happier customers, and that is why sometimes they do the mistake of incorporating so much of features in the application that it overwhelms their users. So again, when you are making an interactive user app and you're talking about many features, like in the last lab session, you may have talked about functional requirements in your software. So basically, these are the features of your solution. So when it is about adding new features in the solution, again, you should assess the risks associated with adding features. We might lose on the customers because they may become overwhelmed by the new interface. In your own life, you would have noticed that a particular app gives a new updated version and you are not quite happy with the particular update for the app and you want to revert back to the previous version because the level of comfort a customer has in immediately embracing the new version, they are not quite comfortable with it. So again, risk assessment is important. So that is why you do not want to lose out your customers or the users of your software application just because you did not plan enough while implementing or programming that particular solution. It's not only about programming, it's about how that piece of code is going to interact with your customer, your client, your stakeholder, how he or she would feel about it. Ultimately, you're trying to create something to be used at the other end, not just for a exercise in how to develop a software. Obviously, that is there. The secondary goal is obviously there, but if you keep your primary goal as this is going to be used by someone, this is actually going to be tested, then the quality of work that you do far exceeds even your own expectations. So similarly, for spiral model, when we are trying to add features, you will be adding a lot of features in your projects also. So think about the risk assessments and what do you gain out of it, what do you lose out of it. There is always a trade-off. And how would it mean to go forward with that approach? So on the screen, you can see a particular graph. I want you to look at this. Sorry. I want you to look at this and how. What do you interpret? Would you please interpret this plot for me? Can you see this 2D graph on your screens? Are you able to see? Any responses?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what is happening in this plot?
It is portraying that a necessary amount of time spent. Hello,
Yes, yes, go on.
am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. So, like a minimum amount of time spent testing is required, but too much of it surely results in loss of market share and risk of total risk. Even though
Okay.
it actually further minimizes the risk of defect, but all over it is a loss.
Okay, so this is your observation. What would you conclude from this observation?
That there is a bridge between over testing and a good amount of testing.
Okay, yeah. So maybe in the long term, too much testing may be detrimental to the market value of the product.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
yeah, so there has to be a balance in the amount of time you are also spending on testing the prototypes also. Because ultimately, your objective is to launch the product to the market as soon as possible because speed is extremely very important, especially in software companies and because the world is uh, about technology. So from this plot, we can see that definitely testing is important. And that is why the discipline of software engineering is very different from the other disciplines because, it has lots of challenges associated with it as well. So we can see from this that after a certain point, risk of losing market share far outweighs the gain in testing. And this is so there is no hard and fast rule about till how long to test. And definitely for that, testers are required who are more experienced because we as developers may not be that good at testing. But the thing is that speed is extremely important in software development and testing is also important. So when we talk about prototypes, basically we are testing and indulging in all these aspects. So then again, keep this concept in your mind that uh, we are not talking about perfectionism here. We are talking about, as Tarun mentioned, a minimal viable product which can function quite well, and then later on we can build on that project or product. So I will just try to recapitulate or concisely say what we discussed in today's class. We talked about spiral model, how it is different from waterfall model, using the example of case study at International Airport Baggage Automation System. And we also understood the trade-off between testing and market value of the product. In our next class, we will carry on this discussion and hopefully you have understood the context of software development from these two. And if you're going to meet your team members for software project, then it is the right time to start asking certain questions of which software development life cycle you are going to follow in this particular project in software engineering. That's all from me today. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. So that's all for today.